outside seam allowance, I'm talking about this seam allowance right here that's just right at 1/4 of an inch. You come down here, this one's at 1/4 of an inch, this is at 1/4 of an inch, but all around. But when you piece it together next to this one with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, it gets a little tricky on matching those points so that they still look like points or look like a triangle or the shape that they're intended to be. And once again, here is another quilt block with some outside 1/4 inch seam allowances, but we want to match these up. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about with today's tutorial. How is everybody doing? It's so good to see you guys. Let me know where you are calling or where you are coming in live from. I am from Salt Lake City, Utah. And hi, Liz. It's good to see you. Liz is from Canada. Hello, Jane in South Wales. We've got Amanda in Louisiana. So many fun places. And I have got something fun to show you today. We are working on, this is a quilt block tutorial on the Live Well, Live Strong quilt. And we are going to be piecing together our finished quilt blocks with the outside seam allowances. Hello, Muriel in Quebec, Canada. Hello, hello. It's so good to see you. Bonjour. And right here we have got these little 1/4 inch seam allowances. And sometimes they match and they work out really great. But when you put two of these together, you know, how do you make sure those outside seam allowances are actually matching up? So as we put those together right like that, that's what we're going to talk about today. But I have something fun to show you. It's right here. I kind of set it down on the floor, and then my little puppy lady, the King Charles Cavalier, she saw something soft and she had to lay on it. This is, I'm going to show you the Live Well, Live Strong quilt. The traditional version is this 60 by 60 inch right here. That is right behind me, right here. And then we've got some negative space ones and the bed runner one. But I have the color version in negative space that I wanted to show you. So remember, there are many different ways you can sew together your quilt. So let me go ahead and hold this up. I could hold it up from tall to small. I don't know which way to do this for you guys. But you can see this right here. See how the quilt is put together, and this is what is put together with negative space. So we used this, what is the name of that fabric? It's bleached denim is the name of this fabric, but it matches kind of this aquamarine texture right here. And so we have the quilt blocks that are floating together in a modern layout with negative space. So the negative space is where we see all of the bleached denim in there. And the Live Well, Live Strong pattern comes with the instructions to make the quilt like this, or to make it as the classic version where they're all put together. But you can see all the different blocks in here. Here's the safety quilt block. Here's the balance quilt block right here. Right here we've got the belong quilt block. The industry quilt block right over here. Anyways, when I'm looking at the camera, I'm like pointing in opposite directions. And then down here we have the strength quilt block. You can see there. But isn't that absolutely beautiful? And we've got movement, power, all the other quilt blocks right there. But I want you guys to know that you can definitely, hello Victor, hello Jane, but you can definitely construct your quilt in negative space like this, is what I call it as the layout, is where the quilt blocks are floating in negative space. So it's really a modern layout. And in the pattern you have the instructions for this, the negative layout, which you can widen this so it becomes, I've got to figure out a place to put this so my dogs just don't lay on it, right? I've got to photograph that quilt so I can send you guys out photos and post those. Okay, so, but what we're going to work on today is sewing your blocks together when you've got these outside seam allowances. And they should be 1/4 inch. That's the ideal thing, right? Is that all of our outside seam allowances are 1/4 inches, but times maybe when they don't turn out to be 1/4 inch, like right here, that's a little bit more than 1/4 inch here, but we definitely have a 1/4 inch here. So what we want to do, oh, Victor, thank you for ordering the PDF. You can't wait to start it, and you've even got the newspaper print paper. That's right, because we do have the small 20 by 20 inch size, and I think I just put that quilt on top of it, and I'm afraid to move it with that. But yes, I'm so excited for you guys. Very fun. Okay, so here we go. Here is, we're gonna piece these quilt blocks together. We're gonna just piece 3 of these, do 2 different combinations of this. Okay, so we're gonna put our calm quilt block, because we always want peace and calm in our lives, and we want to kind of perpetuate that we don't feel as stressed and anxious, right? We want the opposite of stress and anxiety, although there is good stress and there's stress that we need to experience in life. So we're going to sew these together right here, okay? So it is going to look like that. Now, we don't have specific points that are matching up necessarily right here, but we do want to stay true to those 1/4 inch seam allowances, and we have the 1/4 inch seam allowances on both sides of these quilt blocks. So I am going to match these up with some pins. I can also use my fork pins, and I should have brought that, made sure they were right next to me. So I am going to pin just slightly so I'm not on my seam allowance up here. So I'm going to pin so that this is matching together the best that I can actually get it. And I'm going to pin that across the way of the quilt block. And it looks like I'm already a little bit off, so we're going to fix that really fast. And let's line these up just exactly. And I've already squared up my blocks so that they're all matching. Okay, so there we go. Hi, Linda. It's good to see you. I was going to ask you guys, spring is here, she says, and Linda is in Canada. What is it like? You guys, I love hearing the birds right now. And I got this little bird feeder from Amazon. It's kind of corny, but it suction cups to your window. And I actually got it for Betty and Brant, because Betty just loves to see the birds, and she loves to, she loves her birds. But she can sit at her kitchen table, and then they come right up to her window as the bird feeder is suction cupped. I don't know if you guys have seen that out there, but I bought one for myself, so I'm going to install mine. I meant to show you guys what it looks like, but I can't wait to put mine up. But Corey he has a particular window he wants it on, so he keeps saying, well, we're going to put that up later. But I love hearing the birds in the spring. Spring is one of my most favorite seasons, and I think it's just such a season of new life hitting, and you still are getting the moisture and the rain and things like that. Okay, so I love hearing the birds, and I don't know my birds really well, or bird sounds. Okay, now, oh, the geese are back. Oh, Linda, yeah, it's so fun. We were talking about geese ourselves this last week too. So Corey had a goose when he was a young boy, and anyway, so he has got the best memories, and we were talking about that this last week. So the flowers and trees are blooming, and we have a pair of sparrows nesting in our carport. It is so fun to watch this new life come out. I just took Ellie on Thursday to a little a little petting farm that has all these baby animals, and we got to play in there, and oh my gosh, it was so amazing. Okay, I'm going to sew this. I'm sorry, you guys, but I love spring. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do this. Wait, and Betty, I was showing Betty the videos of us with Ellie at the petting zoo, and she wanted to go. I also took Ellie to a little aquarium. Now, before I start sewing on this, I need to change my camera view. Now, you can see here, I've got 1/4 inch seam allowances on this side, okay? But I also have 1/4 inch seam allowances on this side. So let's talk about that. So I can feel, so I just want to kind of have a good idea, because remember, we want to go through that intersection point where this is intersected right there, okay? Where we've got the 2 lines, and we want to cross over that intersection. So we also want to kind of maybe press what we've got for our seam allowances so that we can truly see that intersection and go over it. Now, since we have them on both sides, and these points don't necessarily match up because they are different types of blocks, and the Live Well, Live Strong quilt is like that. So you've got to make sure that you're kind of matching those seams on both sides. But that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's switch this camera view. Let me get you over here. Here is my working space at this moment. And so I am going to go ahead and sew this. And I will see and I will study on both sides. Yeah, Linda, I agree. But I will study on both sides to see which side I want to sew on. So I can see that's pretty much a good 1/4 inch seam. I can look over here and I can see that's a pretty good 1/4 inch seam. This one looks like a good true 1/4 inch seam. This one is my weakest point. So that is less than a 1/4 inch seam right there. So I am actually going to pin this so that this comes down just slightly. So it's a little bit less, I've got a little bit more room up here of fabric showing. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to sew on this side of the quilt blocks, okay? So I study my 1/4 inch seam points because I do want them to turn out good and to match pretty much, all right? And then I'm going to sew them across. So I think I'm confident with this side that these are true 1/4 inches. We'll see when I actually sew this because we're doing a live video and we're going to see how they match up. Okay, so let's go ahead and get that started. And it doesn't feel like my sewing machine's starting real well on that. I am using a consistent 1/4 inch seam as I'm sewing these across. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to try to go through that intersection between the two different ones. And I can feel when I'm going across those other ones, I can feel the thickness of the fabric, that seam allowance is right there. And you may want to press open some of this. I'm going to bring this little point down a little bit. So remember, you can always ease in more quilting. Hey, another thing that I really loved about the quilt that I just showed you that's negative space with the bright colored blocks is how simple I did the quilting on that quilt. And we're going to talk about the quilting of the quilt. So, and I guess that's something that we can talk about too. Okay, so here's what I sewed. Remember, I eased some fabric in here so I'd have a little bit more of a 1/4 inch seam. Let's see what happens on this side. I pretty much hit that 1/4 inch seam. This one could be lower right there. That could be lower. So let's open this up because I may stitch again to fix some of these where I might not feel like I've got really good fits. Actually, that looks pretty good. That's interesting. Okay, let's see where I put this. Okay, I just pressed that open. Let me hold this up closer to the camera. So I've got a little bit more space there, but these look great. But you can see I gave myself a little bit more space where I was worried, so maybe too much space. I'm going to look on this other side, and that's got a little bit more space there too. So maybe I didn't need to ease so much in. Let's flip this around and see if that's where I did my easing. So no, I actually did my easing on this side. So that's really interesting. So we can go back over this and stitch this again closer to where that point is. And try to get that. And you will notice when you go through the thickness of your seams coming together that sometimes you think you're stitching at a 1/4 inch of a seam allowance, but you actually are stitching just slightly. You know, when you come over those bumps, you might go just a little bit less or more. So remember, stitching a 1/4 inch seam allowance isn't always easy to do. And remember, these seams don't have to match so perfectly. I'm just showing you what I do. So remember, like, for example, right here, all of this is so close. Do you know what I mean? That's just perfect for me. I don't feel like this has to be super, super duper perfect. Does that make sense? But this is how you would put those two blocks together. Now, the next block that comes together here that I wanted to kind of review is what would be smart is to put the Love quilt block next to this one. So let me grab that real fast for you guys. Is to actually sew these right next to each other. So I would take these two right here and sew them together.